What's good, True Voices family? We are live with the one and only Carvins Lassant. You know, I gotta act like I'm French when I pronounce your name. So we'll be talking manhood, marriage, and ministry tonight. And from the perspective of faith, family, and fame. In your case, you've experienced some of that. I know you're not done yet, but you've definitely reached some of your goals. And you know, there's a lot of artists back here in New York that definitely aspire to make it, whether it's on Broadway, on TV, and music. And so, love to just pick your brain tonight to really allow them to kind of glean from your experiences, the highs, the lows, what's worked, what hasn't worked, right? All those things.
A lot of lows. All of them.
And that's one of the things that I appreciate. If y'all haven't followed his feed, it's a must. All right, it's a must. I love that you talked about like your journey with fitness and the struggle of what it means to be in a new space and place, and trying to figure out the ins and outs of the West Coast, and at the same time trying to juggle a family, trying to juggle fitness, being real about how you dropped the ball, but also showing there's redemption because you got back on it.
Yeah. And then I feel right back off. So I'm saying it's a journey, bro.
I've been there. Yep, I'm going through something similar myself. I actually had a pretty severe injury to my dominant leg. So I had a PCL and MCL injury, and so I was in a brace for about 2 months. I had to learn how to walk again. And so here I am. Yeah, man.
I know a thing or two about injuries.
Okay, all right.
A whole lot of them, even as we speak.
So for the listener, the viewer who's meeting you for the first time, introduce yourself and where people can find you. Of course, many of you who follow us already know the legendary poet himself. I had to add that name to it, man, because the word is clear. Let others, let others toot your horn. So I'm gonna toot his horn because honestly, bro, I felt that way about you personally. And I would say that about you even if you wasn't on the podcast. I mean, we've known each other for years now. I've been really thinking about that. Like, wow, it's been a minute. And I remember how you kind of came into the faith and how you really just grew and wrestled with what it meant to be a believer and still be an artist. And so I'm giving too much away. Let me stop. You go ahead and introduce yourself.
All of it. No, I mean, it's so funny because I just did a podcast with one of my close friends named Yvonne.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
It was called the New Growth Podcast.
She has like short hair.
Yeah. She's awesome.
I told you I follow the feed.
Awesome sister in Christ. Awesome, just awesome person. And I remember we had this moment where it was like, introduce yourself. Like, who is you? And it feels so weird to even do that now because I feel like I'm kind of changing before everyone's very eyes and a lot in the shadows. So before it used to be like, you already know, it's your boy Carv, poet, actor, playwright, writer, all of that. But like, even those things feel like they don't define me as much as they used to. But if it is anyone, meeting me for the first time, I know. My name's Carvins Lassant. New York born and raised through and through, uptown Harlem. I am a poet. I'm an actor. I'm a writer, playwright. Getting into screenwriting. That has sort of been my work as an artist. Most importantly, right now, man, I'm a husband. I'm a father, and trying to be the best child of God that I can be in this crazy world. So that's kind of like the short stint of who I am. If I were to attach some quick labels.
Right. No, I love that because sometimes we do get wrapped up in what we do being who we are. Sure, and they are different. One of my mentors taught me very early on. He actually put me on to Sonship, the book, and the whole premise that you're a son of God first. You're before you're even a father, before you're a brother, before you're a businessman, before you're whatever you fill in the blank. Connect with your sonship. right? And in the cases of our sisters, your daughterhood, right?
Mhm.
Where your identity is rooted in that first and foremost, because if our identity is rooted as a son of God, as a daughter of God,
Yeah.
that could never be taken away from us, right?
Yeah,
One,
yeah.
because we never earned it, right? You can't earn it. It's
Mhm.
grace.
By
But
grace
two, the
through
job
faith.
you can lose, right? The credentials can come and go. Um, the fanfare can be hot and cold, but being a son, being a daughter,
Yeah,
that's inherent. That ain't going anywhere.
yeah.
No
And it
matter
took me a
how much my
long,
kids might get on my nerves,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? They will always be my sons, my daughters. They would always be, and
And it took
so,
me a long time to get there.
mm,
It took me a really long time to get there.
right, because as an artist, you get so wrapped up in the art, right, and the creative process, and so much of
Yeah,
that is part of your identity.
yeah, and in a way, it's also sneaky, right? Because you're also, for me, I felt like I was doing good works for the Lord and for the kingdom through my work, but
Mm,
you know, but sometimes if you are not adamant about paying really close attention to that line, and that line, one side of the line is doing good works for like God, using your platform, your artistry for the kingdom, and then all the other end is idolatry. Sometimes you can
mm,
double dutch, and I was double dutching without really truly even knowing it. And even in the idolatry, it's just about putting that thing before God, right? Putting
that's
that
good.
thing before well, yeah, putting that thing before the things that that should be inherent in your everyday life, thriving community, being washing yourself in the word. A lot of times your life and your opportunity circumstances can take those things away. And yeah, so it took me a long time to be like, oh, I need to, though art has done so much for my life, it has been a tool. It has not been the source in which it has allowed me to survive. Though it has made me successful in the material world, God has used it to try to draw me to himself. And if I'm forgetting him, then I'm forgetting the whole point why it was brought into my life anyway. So yeah, I'm still sort of in the throngs of wrestling with that one fact of sonship. Yeah.
What helps you get tethered, because there's some young artists listening right now who may not even be self-aware that they're making an idol out of poetry or artistry, or being a creative, whatever their sphere is. And one of the best ways that I've always counseled and discipled those who I've been able to lead, by God's grace, is if it's taking the place of God in your life, if it's taking the center spot in your life, if it's, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
if it's where you're putting your identity in, going back to the beginning of this conversation. So how can they get anchored, right? One, become more self-aware, but then two,
Mhm.
get anchored. What were some of those things that you did? And I know part of it was the bridge, I know part of it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
discipleship, but I would just love for them to hear from you as you unpack what helped you stay anchored and even become self-aware of the idolatry of artistry. One of my good disciples, one of my mentees in the faith, he quickly told me when he really started to make strides for Christ that everything can be an idol.
Yeah.
He was quickly realizing that there were so many slippery slopes in his own life that could easily be idols. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, for me, I'm sorry, you're gonna hear a whole bunch of helicopters because I'm in Los Angeles, and I don't know why. There's always car chases, so you always gonna hear helicopters. They ain't chasing me, but they chasing somebody. But
don't worry, I'm in New York, so you're gonna hear an ambulance
oh
pretty
yeah, yeah,
soon.
I'm going, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. It's gonna be great. Yeah, what makes me tethered? I mean, the unfortunate thing is it took a lot of breaking for me to even begin the tethering myself back to God. And sort of I went through a season of burnout that compromised my mental health in a way that really made me had to sit down and reevaluate kind of the percentages of where I was putting my life and my energy. And pretty much what happened to me is, long story short, is I realized that I had spent the better part of the totality of the whole decade with no real break or Sabbath. I realized that I had spent 10 years without really sitting down and unpacking certain traumas in my life,
Mm.
homelessness, heartbreak, uh, the sort of stress, anxiety, inducing nature of what it is being in an industry that is being an actor, where your livelihood is kind of like blown to the wind quite often. There was just so much that I never sat and really unpacked and healed from. But then at the same time, I did not have a healthy relationship to work. A part of that is being from New York, where work becomes your identity. Is you grinding? What is you doing? What you
Right.
don't do? A part of that was being a son of immigrant
Immigrants.
parents,
Yes.
where you don't realize that when you are first generation American, the looming fear of poverty is a cloud that follows you everywhere you go, right? So I didn't realize that I was changing on a chemical level just watching my father just be stressed all the time. Like, oh, I have to pay bill. I have like it does something actually to your psychology. It brings about a kind of PTSD. So I realized I'd been suffering in a lot of these ways, and I think I'd always suffered from depression since I was a kid. Where I was able to sort of like get through was because I was on a platform. I was always doing stuff, but I finally had to sit with myself. And yeah, I just kind of experienced this season of burnout while I was on Broadway. That really compromised my mental health in a way that really made me had to sit and be like, I'm truly not okay. So I had to create a value system. I had to create a value system. And I said this on Instagram the other day. I had to create a value system that was set before me by God already, of things that I knew needed to be in my life.
Yeah, we reposted that. That was gems.
Yeah. I
That was
knew
so good.
I know that in order for me to be a great child of God, to be a great service as a husband, and to be a great service to people, that I just have to be a healthy individual. I just have to be healthy, right? So am I eating right? Am I resting? Am I in my word? Am I around thriving community? So these were all things that get compromised when you're on the grind, right?
Right.
If a part of my value system is spending time with my wife and making sure that I'm pouring into that relationship, but I can never see her because I'm always auditioning and grinding, then that thing is compromising the value system. If a part of my value system is I want to be a present, emotionally healthy father for my young Black son, but I can never tuck him in at night and I never see him on weekends because the Broadway schedule doesn't allow that, then my value system is being compromised. If a part of my value system is I'm actually healthier when I'm around thriving community, when I'm around brothers in Christ, when I'm around my homies, when I'm around when I'm in the church, when I'm spending unintentional time with people, yo, come over, man, let's make some grilled cheese sandwiches and watch the game. But I can't do that because I have to sacrifice the sort of simplicity of life in order to reach the highest heights of this career, that I'm compromising my value system. So I constantly am going to this rubric and I'm looking at the rubric of the value system and I'm seeing, is this career path, is this thing that I'm deciding to do, is this thing adding to the thing that actually is going to give me life? This thing will give me material treasures, right?
Yeah.
But those things can't come with me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like those things can't come with me. And though resources are good, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, I do got to pay bills. You know what I'm saying? I'm happy that I can be a provider for my family. At the end of the day, the student loans is going to come a knocking, right? Like at the end of the day, I know that I want to be able to buy a home for my family. So I'm not even demonizing this. It's just about where am I putting my identity in, where it should rest. So yeah, how I get tethered to the truth of not making an idol of anything in my life is I look at the value system that I know has already been written and been revealed to me by God through the text. And looking at the text and seeing, is my life reflecting that? And if it's not, then I got to reevaluate. And so that's what I'm constantly doing on a day-to-day basis, sometimes on a moment-to-moment basis. So there was a moment, where I'm like, man, I really need to do this audition. I have like 5 auditions in my inbox right now, but my son was sick. And I'm like, I'm going to take care of my son. He comes before those, he just does.
You have to prioritize. Yeah,
my son is, but a lot of people, and listen, I admire there are so many people who do things of the utmost excellence that I love to death. I love the LeBrons of the world, the Kobe's of the world, people who who sacrificed everything to literally hit the heights of perfectionism
Right.
that we love, right? We love watching the
Yeah,
Mamba.
LeBron's
You know,
my
the Black
dude.
Mamba. We love. I don't want none of their lives.
That's real.
I don't because I know because I have reached some heights in my life and I knew what I sacrificed to get there. And then when I got there, I looked at the cost. And I was like, oh man, I kind of miss being in community. I'm here, but I'm here alone. I got money, but like I'm alone. I can't even share it with people. So yeah, it's about constantly reevaluating. So is there a world in which I can be a healthy individual that is able to do really great things in sort of my craft and in my working field, and I can still sort of be a thriving, beautiful, sort of like healthy person? Probably, maybe there's a way that God will carve that out for me. But until then, I gotta constantly reevaluate. I gotta constantly see what's taking headship over my life and what is really sitting on the throne. Like what throne am I sitting next to? Is it the Father or is it the business? And we gotta that's just me, because I'm trying to be healthy and whole. Because if there's anything the pandemic taught me was things can be ripped away at any moment. So what are we gonna pour into temporary treasures, or are we going to exist in what's the eternal gold? And I'm trying to be a part of the things that I feel like last forever for me.
Yeah, that's so good.
I know that was super long-winded, but
no, but it was needed, and a lot of people are gonna see this, post the Prime, the live show. So we're gonna get this out, and that's gonna be a snippet for sure that we got to share, because there's a lot of artists who are desperately in need of the things that you were just talking about: prioritizing community, really, again, being self-aware of idols that sometimes can camouflage as ministry, artistry, right? Projects, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And there's this real big emphasis in this new generation, and much of it has been brought up by the Gary V's of the world that just, hustle. And it goes back to your point that there's very little rest, very little Sabbath, if at all, in that equation. And that's why you get so many people that end up with burnout very early in life. And
you talked about discipleship. When I hit that burnout season, actually I started having panic attacks on stage. And I had a really bad one where I had to be taken off stage back in 2019. I think it was April of 2019. I had to be removed off stage and sent home in the middle of the show. And it was on a Sunday. I'll never forget it. And that Monday, my wife...
So the house was packed.
Say that again?
The house was packed. It's a Sunday night show.
Oh, yeah. Sunday matinee.
And this
show.
Was when you were at Broadway, or you was already in LA?
This is when I was on Broadway. This is when I was on Broadway. I was having a panic attack during the whole first act. So for an hour and a half, I was having a panic attack. And
so did they have your understudy come in? Like, how does that
work? Yeah. So I had one of my understudies and covers end up getting in the costume during intermission. I pushed through and I fought through. And even like the grind in me still was going to finish the show. I called my wife and I was like, tell me to come home. Because if you don't tell me, I'm not going to come home. I'm going to finish the show. She was like, come home. And then my stage manager took me off. They brought in my understudy, who I was super, super grateful for. But the next day was what I'll never forget. She called our pastor at the time, James Roberson, lead pastor of the Bridge Church. And James sat down and lovingly, he wouldn't call it this, but I call it this, so this is how I took it. Lovingly rebuked me and said, I actually feel you've been disobedient because you haven't been resting. And like, because you haven't been resting, you've been making this thing your life, and I'm ordering you to pick a Sabbath. And since that day, I've always picked a day to be nowhere.
Okay. So imagine if you've gone through that and you were devoid of a church family, of an elder pastor in your life, of discipleship, of a supportive spouse, right? Like going back to this whole premise, family, whether you've seen this live or after, many of you are going to see this after.
Yeah.
The key here is what anchors you.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many artists who, I literally had one guy tell me when we asked him about his home church, because and you know this because you've been through the process of when we put together our event, and I'm still bummed out to this day that the videographer we got never got us your footage. Oh man.
Was that what happened? It's so funny.
The
other day I was like, yo, why did they ever put my footage up there?
Yeah,
I never knew what happened. I just thought it was because I was
and this was the lesson for me. I will never have another videographer and cover any of our events without a written contract. I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
But that process of getting on with our events on our stage to bless our mic, it was really intentional for us to go, wait, they have to be screened, they have to be vetted, because we have so many people who claim Christianity but don't really live it, especially the artist type, right? Like, and especially in today's day and age, and in America, there's a lot of cultural Christianity. Yeah. And if you're not familiar with that term, I would highly recommend checking out the book Christian Atheist, and even doing some Googling, some research on cultural Christianity. And it's this phenomenon that Americans historically identify with the God of the Bible, especially in the Bible Belt in the South. There is a cultural Christianity. In other words, the culture says that this is the faith that I align with and that I identify with, but I don't necessarily follow. In fact, most cases is just that. They don't follow it, but they recognize it, and they even honor it to some extent in their life. And you see it when Easter comes around, and when Christmas services come around, when baptisms come around, right? You see it when people proclaim faith during tragedies. Cultural Christianity will convince you that you're actually a believer when you're not, because the word is clear, right? Follow my commandments. He says, those who know me know my voice and follow, right? Follow me. The mark of a true disciple is following. There is an active participation in the faith that you claim, but there's so many cultural Christians, and really all it is AKA lukewarm Christianity. That's really what it is. And I love the way Cole Campbell put it. He said, we do it for the culture, and what we don't realize is that the culture is a code word for the world. And cultural Christianity prevails itself so much in the artist circles. And so the whole point being is, when we would vet, Christian poets and artists to be a part of our events and shows, many a times we would get pushback, but it would always be from those who didn't have a church home, because they couldn't pass that vetting process. And we were understanding, like, hey, homie, like, and we've made several exceptions. Like, if you're new to a particular area and you still haven't found a church home, okay, we understand that. But you should have a church home that you can reference from previous times. There should be a mark of Christianity on your feed. And that's another thing we would do. We would look at their feeds and we would go like, hey, is this fruit? You know what I'm saying? Of someone who's proclaiming Christianity. And that's so critical, because for you to be at such a high level of artistry and still say, I had a home church, I had a pastor who I was accountable to, who could rebuke me, who could disciple me, who could correct me. Like, if you're listening to this right now, who can check you? If no one can check you, you're missing one of the vital aspects of discipleship, of Christianity in your life. Because if I wasn't checked years ago, I wouldn't be here today. There's no way. You need correction. Like, it's part of the loving service of a disciple.
And for me, I feel like I knew that before I was even a believer, because I'm from the street. You know what I'm saying? Like, I like, for me, if you are not
like the big homie in the street could check you.
Yeah. And for me, like, I think this is why I was kind of amazed when I came to the faith, because I actually did see a lot of parallels to sort of ideologies that I kind of already inherently understood. And I just kind of always knew, if you are going to survive in the world, if you don't have an individual who bears a particular kind of wisdom, be able to tell you about yourself, you will always fall victim to kind of anything. right? So and then I also come from sports, right, where I played basketball growing up, right? And there was something inherent that a coach could see off of the court that could speak into a sort of situation that can radically change the circumstances of how a game can go.
Well,
right?
It also helps you 6'4", not taller.
You know what I'm saying? But also, when you are an actor, there's a reason why there's a director, right? You go through this process called tech rehearsal. Tech rehearsals where they're putting all the technical aspects embedded into the show, where the light's going to happen, where the props. I'll never forget a director said this, and I hate to be that corny guy, like, oh, and the Lord spoke to me through that, but I did think it was kind of poignant. I do think it was kind of poignant where I was standing on stage, and I realized the director could see something that I couldn't, because my vantage point. She would always say, it was a play that I did in grad school, and she would say, "Hey, Carvins, I need you to walk to your right because you're out of your light." From my vantage point, when I looked down, the pool of light looked a particular way, and I thought I was in it. So I would always stand in the wrong place. And then she would always scream at me, "Carvins, you're out of your light. 2 feet to the right, 2 feet to the right." And so there's something inherent about submission in that. There's something inherent about trusting to the person who sees the totality, right? Who has the bird's eye view, and our God has the
ultimate,
the whole universe,
right?
With the galaxies and all creations, within his viewpoint, right, where he can see the beginning from the end. And there were things inherent in just some of the things that I did in life that for me didn't feel far-fetched or crazy. It always felt far-fetched or crazy for me when I was around people who, if you can't be corrected, I don't even like being around people like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that actually scares. It says a lot about someone's character to not have the humility to be like, to not hear about yourself.
Right.
And so I constantly make sure I try to, and this is not to boast about anything. I praise God that He's graced me with kind of those people to be in my life, and graced me for the fact that I even have an affection towards that.
Yes.
But yeah, that didn't feel far-fetched to me. I was happy that I had someone come pull up and be like, "Yo, you need a rest." It changed my life.
So good.
It changed my life. So yeah, I don't know.
So community, Sabbath, prioritization. That's what I'm gleaning from this. And I hope that if you're an artist, creative, leader, or just an everyday person watching this, and you're trying to figure out how to really wrestle with the balance that's needed in your life, I think those 3 principles stand out in this conversation so far.
And to be clear, it doesn't mean don't work hard, because you got to do that.
Right.
I believe you got to have blood on your hands, sweat on your brow. And if you want to do things in excellence, especially for God, you do have to put a particular kind of work in. It's about, is that work your identity? It's really about that. That's what we're talking about here.
Right. So help us understand, what does it take to make it to Broadway, to make it as a thespian, to make it as a poet, to make it as an artist? In your opinion, what are some tangible, practical tips or insights that you can share now over the decade plus of artistry, right? Where you can say, yeah, you know what, these are some of the big lessons that I've taken away from what it means to be, and maybe successful is not the right word, but an accomplished artist, right? And I think that's probably a better wording, because everybody has different levels and different goals. And I think another thing that's helped me with ministry and beyond is replacing the word successful with faithful. Because my definition of success can totally be off base from what God wants, and many times He just wants faithfulness. And so I know what it's like to do national, large-scale ministry, but now I know what it's like to also do super small, local, concentrated ministry. And then to know that God is pleased with both blessed me, because there takes a level of faithfulness to accomplish both. So yeah, what's some gems that you can, because there's young poets, actors, artists, creatives watching and that will watch. What helped you get to Broadway? What helped you get to the stages and places that you got with poetry. Like, again, family, like most people know you now through your acting, but I still remember you and the crew, the fire breathers from Philadelphia. I mean, the Miles and all these dudes that just were like, oh, man, I still remember that event you invited me to, man. In Midtown. I don't know if you remember that. I'm trying to remember the name of the venue, huh?
It was the Strivers Row show at Stage 48?
Yes, the Strivers Row show. And I forget the name of the venue. Remember the name of the venue?
I think it was Stage 48.
Yes.
It was Midtown.
Yes.
Stage 48.
Yes, you broke it back like that.
Yeah.
Like that to me is like, this is why I call you legendary, because what you and that Strivers Row crew did was legendary to us who are poetry heads, who are poet heads, who are spoken word fanatics.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I appreciate that, man, because this being a part of the Strivers Row continues to be one of the biggest highlights of my career. Sometimes bigger than the Broadway stuff and everything else that I've ever done, because for me, I feel like we really influenced a craft in a particular era of the art form that is spoken word performance poetry. But beyond that, I mean, it's so, you said, what can I offer? I mean, there's kind of the spiritual
let me just say this real quick because I want to give you your roses. I want to give you your flowers, right? While you can still smell them. Here's probably what you don't know. Part of the inspiration to True Voices came from Brave New Voices. And so many of the Strivers Row crew, right, was the first gen out of there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Brave New Voices, True Voices. You see it?
Wow.
Because my thinking was, if their voices are brave, and they are, as believers, our voices are true.
Yeah.
And so whether you realize it or not, like, that's why I say legend, because I remember 07, 06. I remember, right. I remember being inspired and my soul stirred up by Brave New Voices, and thinking to myself, yo, what would it look like to do this, like with the filter and the lens of the gospel? What would it look like to give a stage to young people, in particular high school and college age poets who love Jesus, but also could spit fire?
Yeah.
So I don't believe I ever shared that with you.
Yeah. No, I never knew that.
But that literally is, and now we just hit 10 years. Can you believe it, Carl?
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, it actually makes sense now I'm thinking about it.
We started our first event 2012, so 2022 is 10 years since our first event. But I was sitting on True Voices since 2007. And then I started interest meetings and promotion in 2011. So part of that was God waiting for my character to catch up to my calling, right? Yeah. But part of that was also like it just sitting there and just thinking to myself, like, yo, nobody else is doing this yet?
Yeah.
And realizing that God was calling me to do it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, again, just, that's how much it means to me. That's why I say legendary.
Shout out to, Urban Word NYC, which was the nonprofit organization, one of the biggest youth literary organizations out here. Shout out to Youth Speaks and Young Chicago Authors, who all kind of help mold this sort of new generation of incredible young literary artists, poets, rappers,
especially Chicago. I went down the rabbit hole and learned about the first slam out of Chicago.
Yeah.
I was inspired, bro.
And it's so. Yeah, it's so crazy, but I love that you brought that up, because I think there are sort of two sort of brackets, right, in terms of like what I would offer about what it would mean to continue to be faithful and grow, or quote unquote be successful as an artist. And I think one is spiritual and one is practical. The spiritual part of it is, if you're not faithful with little, you will never be faithful with much. And the only reason why the Broadways meant something, it's funny. I don't know if you ever saw that crazy show. It was pastors of LA. You know how they got like the Real
Oh,
Housewives. I don't know if you
yes,
said crazy shit.
yes.
But one of the dudes said something that
I've
was real
seen clips,
interesting.
and it always upsets me because people then generalize and think, "Oh,
Of
pastors
course,
are
of
that
course,
way,"
of course.
but
But
it's
one of the
usually the
pastors said
opposite.
something that was super interesting to me. He was like, "You see my glory, but you don't see my story." And I was like, well, that was real. Because people see the Broadway, but what they don't see was the decade-long journey of when I was a young theater artist, sort of transitioning out of poetry, writing my own solo shows, doing shows in small black box theaters with like 5 people there. Right? People see Broadway, but they don't know the Carvins, who was on a salsa dance team in 2007 and first laid eyes on Lin-Manuel Miranda's work in the Heights, an off-Broadway theater on 37th Street next to this nonprofit that I worked at. And they didn't know that from that moment is when I decided that, yo, I'm gonna try to be an actor. I'm gonna go get training. Right? People see the Broadway, but they didn't see when I spent 2 grueling years at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, right following
the fine arts. They don't know
of homelessness. Right? People see Broadway, but they didn't see when I got the 2nd degree at St. John's University, where I was touring full time with the Strivers Row, editing films on my laptop, writing papers, getting a 2nd degree in dramatic arts and film and television. They see Broadway, but they don't see, in my first year of grad school, we're not even allowed to do performances in front of an audience. They're like, you're not ready yet.
Wow.
So they didn't see when I did a full Shakespeare production of Julius Caesar in a classroom, bare bones, where we had to bring our own costumes or whatever. So if you're not faithful with little, you can never be faithful with much. And a lot of times, and I fall into this pitfall all the time because I'm in the industry. TV and film is a little different because whatever, but at least with theater, a lot of times you're seeing the highlight reel on Instagram, but you're not seeing the day-to-day, what it is to do life, to do this thing, right? So you got to be faithful. If you have not fallen in love yet, sitting down and reading a poem in a living room, you're not going to love it when you're on the big platform. So you constantly have to ask yourself, what is your intention and motivation to like do this thing? And if it's just to get recognized, you're gonna have a really tough time. So you got to be faithful with little in order to be faithful with much.
So
because even when you get on those platforms, every platform is just a different bracket, right? Because what people don't tell you is that there are platforms within platforms, right?
Okay.
So like, there's
Give us
even
an example.
higher. So there's even, everyone is always going to feel like they're unseen, unheard, and not given their just due, no matter where you are, even the people who got Oscars. You know what I'm saying? So like when I reach Broadway, I'm like, all right, like I'm at the heights of like what it is to be a theater practitioner and an artist.
Right.
There's still going to be a desire for more. Right? Then I'm like, why am I not booking television and film? There's still going to be something. So even with all that I've done, people play me all the time. People play me like I've done nothing.
Yeah, I remember, and I appreciate that about your feed. I remember you being honest about like, I'm here, I'm constantly auditioning. You know, I remember it was year 1 when you first moved out there, and you was just like, hey man, like ain't nothing popping. And then it doesn't help that COVID hits. It doesn't help.
Hey,
like the
you
world
see all
goes
them flowers
upside
you just
down.
gave me? You see all them flowers that you just gave me? I can take those flowers and put it on the grave of some of my dreams right now. Like, I've auditioned, and I can be transparent because I'm always trying. I've been auditioning for television and film for 6 years, no matter all that I've done, right? Because I was an internationally known artist before I was even on Broadway. Even with all that I've done, I have not booked one gig, not one. Not even like a background, like not even like an extra in a homies person, not even like a 2-liner in a TV show. Like, hey, you want some juice with that? Like, not even that, right?
Is it because it's such a different world? Because it's funny is I've always heard Hollywood actors wanting to make the transition to Broadway into the thespian, Actors Guild and those stages so that they can get credible stage time in what's called real acting, right? It goes back to your point, like you always want more. The TV and the movie actors want the theater, and the theater actors want the TV.
I don't have an answer to it, because an answer would suggest that there's a rhyme or reason to this business, and there isn't. But all I'm saying to point that out is, even with all I've done, people, a lot of people disregard my artistry as like, oh, you do a little like you do that little rap thing. Like, people have called my poetry that little rap thing.
Syncopated poetry at its finest.
You know what I'm saying?
Are you kidding me?
But the only thing that keeps me is because I've been faithful with little.
Right.
That's really the sort of spiritual side of what I would offer. The practical side is I'm just a crafts person. I love and I appreciate. I don't care what it is, yo. Like, if you're the most fire plumber, that's so dope to me, right? If you're the most fire, like, I feel like at NYU, I met someone who majored in making ice cream. Because, like, in certain schools in NYU, I think it's called Gallatin, you can create your own. It's a school in the undergrad. You can create your own major. And I'm like, you make ice cream, bro? Like, tell me more about that. I don't care what it is, but if you just work to a point of excellence where you don't make that thing your identity, but you do it because you want to honor it, that's just so beautiful to me. So the practical side is like, whatever it is, you must be immersed into every part of it. If it's poetry, you got to be reading everything. You got to be writing everything. If it's acting, you got to find, where are the classes? Where are the people? Where can I learn from? How can I, if you got a library card, you better go out there and just like soak things up. So you got to be faithful with little, and you got to be a crafts person. You have to be diligent. You have to be incredibly diligent on the things that you desire to do, because you want to give that thing honor, especially if it's something that God put into your life. You know,
that's so good. But what comes to mind on a poetry end, because we have so many poetry heads, I love to ask anytime I have poets on the show, and it's many a times, but not always. I've been intentional. We've had pastors on, we've had, rappers, artists on, we've had therapists on, right? And I want to continue to mix it up. Just basically, anytime I do have poets on, though, I always love to ask, what's your process? I try to help people understand, like rappers, different poets have different process. Some write, some don't write, some freestyle off the head, some takes days and weeks to craft a single 3-4 minute poem, right? Some can do it in no time. What's that process like for you? What are some practical steps that you take to formulate a spoken word piece? Like, and it could be a slam piece, or it could be a non-slam piece. For those who don't know, the slam piece has to be much more condensed. You're talking about 2.5 to 3 minutes max, because of the rule set. But yeah, what does that look like for you? So just give people an insight on kind of like what you do, A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3 to help that aspiring poet who's trying to figure out, how do I carve out, how do I, craft, to your point, a spoken word piece?
That's great, man. That's a great question. I haven't communicated this in a long time. It obviously depends on what it is, because it's one thing if you're writing a piece for yourself. It's another thing if you're writing a piece for a slam. It's another thing if you've been commissioned to write a piece of work, right? Let's
go with the slam versus a piece that you're writing that is.
I'll do a piece that I want to write. That I'll just do that. So for me, I always start with a free write. I always start with, I'm not even thinking about a poem, but I'm getting everything as much as I can onto the page. How am I feeling? I would usually do a sort of timed stream of consciousness. It's what we would call word vomit, where you literally have to write and you cannot stop. You just can't stop, right? I would put a timer on for 15 minutes and I would do that. That timer goes off, another 15 minutes. For me, I'm trying to get as much as I can onto the page. What am I feeling?
Interesting. 15-minute timers.
Let's just put everything down on the page. Then after free write, I do a sort of process called revisit. I go back and I read that thing. Because a lot of times you can glean a whole poem out of one line of a 5-hour free write that you wrote. That's actually the thing that you want to say.
Right. So the edit's where it's at, right?
The edit is where it happens. So this is the first part, and we're not even at the edit yet.
Right.
But this is just the revisit. So I revisit the page, and then I go, what am I trying to say here? What is happening? And I'll give you an example. I wrote this piece about my wife, and I wanted to write like a love poem. But what I was realizing is that all my love poems before I was married are completely different now, because they're not as flowery and whatever. And I'm like, oh, love is like work. Love is like mad work. So,
Word.
I wrote this poem and I just wrote a free write. And the only phrase from that free write that kind of existed in the poem was, I think the line was like, "We fight for reconciliation." And I was like, oh, that's the poem. The poem is about the true making of love is actually fighting to be reconciled to the person you are called to. So then from there, what I do is then I go try to write a poem, right? I'll break it up in stanzas. I'll try to write it out, and then that'll be my first draft. After my first draft, I go and I do a second revisit. I go into that first draft and I do this process called, it sounds crazy, but it's called trimming the fat. It's called trimming the fat. And it's about removing some of the things that don't need to be there because it's not giving nourishment to the poem. So a lot of times that's certain words. A lot of times that's certain sentences and lines. And then once I do that, then I kind of get like a third draft of it. And then that third draft, a lot of times I'll sit with for years.
Wow.
Like a lot of times I'll sit with for years. I may share it once here or there. I may perform it, and then I'm like, it's not finished. It's not. There's something else I can do with it. There's something else I can do with it. So I'll have a third draft that I'm constantly reworking. And that's why it's even weird to write poetry books, because sometimes I'll go back and I'll look at the book and I'm like, there's something I want to do with that poem that I need.
But it's done.
Yeah,
so we need a volume 2.
Yeah. It's like I got to do the remix to the remix.
So where can people find this book? Let's do a quick shameless plug.
Well, I don't even know if there's any more in stock, but my most recent book was called Target Practice.
Bro, you got to put that on an ebook.
Yeah. I have to.
Really?
I've been doing.
Because then you don't have to worry about stock.
Man, I've been singing all these Hamilton songs. Hamilton is about to be over, so I'm gonna have a season where I can get back into my own work. But
I got you.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. So that was my latest work, and that work was actually about my experiences with sort of racism and white supremacy, sort of growing up as a first generation Haitian American. It was about grief and mourning amongst Black people in light of all of the police brutality and sort of the state-sanctioned violence that was happening against young Black men.
And I believe this is pre-George Floyd.
Yes. So I wrote this in 2019.
Yeah, you was on it.
Yeah, I've worked on it for 2 years. I started working on it in 2017 because of the death of Philando Castile in Minnesota. And so, yes, I had been working on it, and then the release ended up happening in 2019, early 2019. But yeah, Target Practice, I do have an EP with the same title, sort of a 5-track EP of poems and songs that I wrote.
From the book.
From the book. And
okay, that's still available.
Yeah, that's still available. And I do have just some like video clips from like the release and stuff on my YouTube page, Carmen Sasan. So if you just look up Carmen Sasan Target Practice.
Definitely gonna put that in the description below. For sure. So if you're watching this, just scroll down and you'll be able to connect. What was it like then? Is your process for slam pieces similar? You just trim a whole lot more fat because you got to get it within the rule set of that 2:30, 3 minute. But the process is still the same for you.
Process is still the same. Slam is a little bit more because it depends on which forum, because a lot of it is kind of sped up.
Right,
so,
and whether or not it's a team piece.
Yeah, so if you're on a team, a lot of times, and shout out to Mahogany Brown, who was my coach when I was on the New York Slam team. Mo Brown will give you assignments. You're gonna write a poem about this. Go write that. I need it by tomorrow. You gotta get it in.
Right. Another great example of accountability in your life.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. I need that by tomorrow. Stop playing. And I'm like, all right. And even if you bring something, I mean, the whole sort of trimming the fat. I learned that from mahogany.
Okay.
I learned that the trimming the
Shout
fat,
out to
the lipo
mahogany.
stuff. I learned that from mahogany, because she does it masterfully. Masterfully. I've seen her take 5 poems from the team and be like, all right, it's a group piece now. And I'm like, whoa. How'd you do that? Like clockwork. A lot of times Mo can do it on the spot. I need to like write a free write, like be in my feelings. I can like write a poem and edit as she goes. It's crazy. Anyway,
So good.
Yeah, shout out to Mo Brown for that. But sorry, yeah, you're gonna hear my child running around.
It's all good.
Yeah, the process is kind of still the same. I know I have to condense it a little bit more because we never want to go overtime because you lose points in a poetry slam when you go overtime.
Right.
A lot of times,
are you giving yourself the 30-second cushion, or you staying true to that?
I give myself a 60-second cushion, so I'll write a poem to be 230. Okay. So usually for folks who aren't, I don't know what is happening right now.
It's all good. You're married with a child. There's no kind of noises that are gonna happen.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the poetry slam format, but usually you would have, of
course,
3 minutes or in 15 seconds to perform, and you get a 15-second grace period. As soon as you hit 3:30, every like 10th of a second, you get deducted like half a point or something like that. Yes. So I would write my poems to be 2:30 to leave room for crowd reaction. Honestly, to leave room for pauses, dramatic pauses. Because I'm mad dramatic. And to leave room for like, honestly, man, like for the Holy Spirit to take over, man. Sometimes like it's a beautiful. Sometimes what's happening is so beautiful. You kind of need that room. And a lot of my pieces at the time when I slammed 10 years ago, because I haven't been in a slam since actually 10 years. Wow. The last time I competed, I did coach in 2014, but the last time I competed was in 2012.
Wow.
It was 2012.
What is it that you missed the most of slamming? Is it the camaraderie or the competition? Both? Is it the travel? Is it the nerves? Man, for those who don't know what we're talking about, you gotta experience it for yourself.
I think I just miss being, because acting is just so different, especially TV and film. Right. Because TV and film is super arbitrary. But I just miss the expertise of just being in a room of watching people who are at the height of their craft do a thing. It's like just super incredible to me. So I miss the culture. I miss the culture of it. Like I miss working hard, writing a piece, working on it, going to the cafe. Like there was so much about the culture that when I say I was a poetry head, I was a poetry head. I was in a venue every single day, maybe except for Sundays. Wow. Like if there were poets there, I was there, and around the country. Right. Like there were poets there, I was there. And so I miss that. But I was also a young buck then. My back hurt too much for that. My kneecaps hurt. Yeah.
Favorite poet before we move on to the next category. Who would, to put you on the spot? Favorite poet all time, favorite poet now. You could even take it out and say Maya Angelou. You could you could always go with one of the historians, you know what I'm saying?
That's tough. That's really
I'll give you, how about top 3?
You gotta give me like a top 10, bro.
Top 5.
It's too hard. I mean, I'm just gonna go off the list of the ones I admire. Saul Williams, hands down. Saul Williams, game changer. Probably
the joint he did with the scroll.
Zora Howard, hands down. It's hard because I want to say a lot of my homies.
Of course, you're gonna list the whole Strawberry's Row.
Yeah, it's like I gotta list the whole Strawberry's Row in that. But it's so hard.
We'll just put Strawberry's Row.
I love Buddy Wakefield, Andrea Gibson, Buddy Wakefield, Andrea Gibson, Saul Williams, Mo Brown, Jai Poetic. It's just too many, man. It's just too many. Yeah. It's just too Man, Ken Archon. There's just too many. Corey Jackson from Minnesota. There's just too many. It's just because again, I love the craft. I love the craft.
Right. So
yeah.
good. Okay, so let's transition before we come to an end. Let's talk about, we talked a lot about artistry, ministry / right, because a lot of this is both and for you. And the whole process of it, the grind, the accountability, the balance, the prioritization, all really gems, good stuff. Now and you've referenced a couple of times during our conversation the wife, your son. What is it like now to take that manhood, ministry, and marriage and make that work? What has been some of your greatest lessons? And I say that with this in mind. I always tell my son, every loss is a lesson. Right. And one thing I always tell young couples in particular is don't give up too soon, because you get better at marriage historically if you're both working at it than worse. Just like anything else, you usually get better in school over time. Right? You get better at work or your profession the more time you put into it.
Yeah.
So many are rookie cookies and are like, this is daunting. I don't understand how people even pull this off. You're just in year 1 or 2 or 3, right? Just give it time and you'll get better. Right now, you're still a rookie, right? Yeah. You're not considered a vet until year 4 anyway. And that's why we applaud the couples when they say they've been married a decade, 20 years, 40 years. That's why we applaud, because we understand the longevity of it is where it's at.
I mean,
so I just threw your alley-oop on the marriage tip, on the fatherhood tip. Talk to us about what it's been like to learn and to grow and really the blessings, the highs and lows of it. But so many in our culture today, like, to have such a disdain for marriage when it's one of the most beautiful things you could ever do.
Yeah. And for me, it's been the most beautiful and the most difficult, challenging.
That sounds about right.
Discouraging, sometimes disappointing thing I've ever done. And what I'll say, this marriage has truly been the most sanctifying thing I've ever experienced. Ooh. Fatherhood has been the most healing thing I've ever experienced.
So good.
And man,
so marriage is what? The most sanctifying, and fatherhood
sanctifying thing has been the most healing
good.
Thing that I've ever experienced. And I'll say this. I was one of those individuals in the first, second, third year of my marriage. I'm like, I don't think this is gonna work. I think I made a terrible mistake. This is too hard. This is too difficult. Because I made a mistake. You wanna know what my mistake was, bro? I equated being wise beyond my years because of trauma and life experience as the same thing as maturity. And it's not the same thing, if that makes sense. I've always been beyond my years because I've had a particular kind of life experience growing up in New York, having immigrant parents, how hard I had to work for some of the things. I've always been wise beyond my years, but I always thought that wisdom was the thing that made me mature. Maturity is something that can literally only exist after time, because time is going to unearth areas of where fruit of the spirit really has to exist in.
Come on now.
So what I realized was, and thank God that I had my pastor and that I had people pour into our marriage constantly to be like, yo, y'all just got married, y'all gotta chill, you'll have time, you're in this for a lifetime, you'll grow in this area may take a decade or whatever. But the reason why I call marriage sanctifying is because marriage is the thing that makes me work on every fruit of the spirit all at the same time.
So good.
And what ends up happening is that a lot of times I'm stressed in my marriage, but I'm not realizing what it's doing to me. And then I'll go to work and then people would say, Carmus, you're so patient. And I'm like,
I am.
Really? I'm like, I am? Or they'd be like, man, Carl, you're so understanding. Like the way you even just dealt with that conflict right there. I don't know how you do it, man. That's crazy. And I'm like, I am. And it's because marriage for me is a gym. And the
It
world
trains all
sometimes is
those
walk
muscles.
and the world sometimes is me walking out. You know, you go to the gym, you looking a little good, and people are like, oh, you lost a little weight. You doing that. So that's what happens in the world. They say, oh, you lost a little weight. Look at you being all patient. That's because I'm working that out in my marriage every day.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. You're so understanding. That's because
I'm
I'm
sure your
working
son
out.
has helped.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So
kids to do that, boy. They'll test all those patients.
Yeah. So it's so marriage for me has made me work on every aspect of the fruit of the spirit: patience, forbearance, kindness, faithfulness. It's made me work all of those things out in a radical way. And and I also got married young. I got married real young. We're 8 years married. I remember when I got engaged. Matter of fact, I got engaged a couple of days before the True Voices event.
Yeah, I remember.
I remember when I got engaged. And bro, you don't even know this. You gave me a piece of wisdom that actually spearheaded the engagement.
Ooh, let me hear this.
I'm
getting roses. I'm getting flowers.
Yeah. Let me give you a rose. You said to me, any woman who you can come before God with in prayer is a woman to marry. And the revelation of like, I think I gotta propose to this woman didn't come from a beautiful experience. It came from an argument. We got into a really terrible argument, but it was the way we handled the argument that said, I think I need to be with this woman for the rest of my life. We reconciled through the argument. And then by the end of the argument, we were literally on our knees praying. And you had just said that to me a day before.
So dope.
And then the day after I bought the ring.
Wow.
So, a lot of times. So I think that I also think if anyone is desiring marriage, the most important thing is you got to differentiate what is a godly non-negotiable and what is a worldly preference.
So good. Give us an example.
Well, yeah. So listen, a worldly preference, which you should desire, is like, you got to be debt free. You got to be ready to build something. You got to have this. You got to have that. Like, worldly desires that people are saying, if I don't have this, then there's no way that I can be. But really, the godly non-negotiables is that person submitted under authority? Can that person be corrected? Does that person have spiritual authority?
Wow, this coming full circle to the beginning.
Yeah. Are they in community? Who do they do life with? Or do they serve? Do they have a job? But not because so that they can just provide, but with a job, do they have a particular kind of discipline that says that they can commit themselves to something?
Oh, that's so good.
That's a godly non-negotiable.
So it's not a job for the sake of financial come up for you. It's a job, right? It's a job that shows discipline, structure. Yeah. Right, that's so good.
Because that shows character.
Yes,
so a lot of people. So I got a lot of homegirls is like, a man can have all those things, but they're not like debt free because they got some school loans, and they're like, yeah, I can't marry him. And I'm like, that's not a godly non-negotiable. That's a preference. That's a good preference to have, but like we got to check that. And I'll say the same thing for dudes.
Right, and is that realistic in today's day and age?
Well, if you got the Holy Spirit in your life, it is. But
no, I mean, the expectation of non-debt or no debt when this generation and the generation prior, these last two generations have been coupled with debt like
people
no generation
too much, bro. People on Instagram too much. People are on Instagram too much. They people on Instagram too much, and they think things are more realistic than they actually are.
If you look at the numbers.
Yeah, I know people are like, oh, nah, we got to make $100,000. I'm like, do you know that puts you in the top 10% of earners in the United States of America?
The average is like
half of that. That's not even realistic. But then I'll have homeboys who are the same way. Nah, she got to like look like this. I'm like, for what?
Right.
Does she like love God? I mean, I'm not saying like
you want to be attractive.
Preferences, but what I'm saying is what takes precedent, what's primary and what's secondary.
Yes, so
right.
Good.
We got to pour into seeds, not so because seeds give us fruit. That's all I'll say. But
no, that's so good because it leads me to this whole notion now of being married and seeing what it's like out here, and then all these influencers talking about dating and who's marriage material, who's not, and claiming to have led ministry, but clearly is in the world now. You know, the Kevin Samuels of the world, and the Shiraz and all these others. And I'm just like, as believers, we should have way better discernment than just be chalking this dude's up, right? This dude's advice up without like filtering it through the word. Even if there are some points and like valid points made by him and others that are like, not for nothing, like that's biblical, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But what you said before and after that is so unbiblical or so false that I can't take your advice. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously, right? How much of it is just being a shock jock? How much of it is, right, really wanting to try to have the buzzwords and the Instagram clip worthy, right? Videos versus...
For me, at the end of the day, I don't listen to nobody who's not doing anything I don't want to do. That's why basketball players respect player coaches more, people who actually play the game. Right. Like, that's not to say that God can't speak through someone and give me a particular kind of wisdom that can then, move mountains in an area or circumstance in a marriage or whatever. But like, I'm looking to married folks.
Right. So the best people that Christians who are not married should be taking advice from are Christians who are married.
If that's the kind of marriage you want. I mean, yeah, like it's basic math to me. If that's I'm not saying that that's all who can speak into your life, or you can learn from.
But that's a credible source.
A credible source. But again, back to what you said, but you also have to vet them, right? You got to test the spirit, right?
Yes.
Are they living a day-to-day life that you would consider is aligned with aligns with the text, but also aligns with what you believe? Someone who loves Jesus, period.
Right.
Are they kind?
So being an artist who's married, what are some of the biggest tips or maybe just advice you can give to the husband or to the wife of the resident artist in the household, right? Like, your wife has clearly held you down, right? Clearly been by your side through ups and downs, and no marriage is perfect. And I love that you were so transparent about that. And I would second that and say yes and amen. Marriage has definitely been the best relationship I've ever had, but it's also been the most challenging relationship I've ever had. Only second to Christ, right? Christ, the relationship I have with Christ is incredibly rewarding, amazing, beautiful, but also incredibly difficult and challenging, right? But I think that couples who have a resident artist in the house probably struggle even more so, because as artists, we can be fickle, we can be emotional, we can...
Well, my wife is an artist too, so it's a
so that helps. Okay, that helps.
No, not for me.
Okay, so that helps a lot. So do you think that was one of the reasons why you guys are now pushing, you're there, you're 2 years away from a decade, you know what I mean? Is that part of the longevity, an artist understanding an artist, y'all being able to
a little bit
bob that way?
A little bit, but no.
Okay, that's real.
A little bit, but nah. Because in a lot of ways, because we both were artists, we kind of both conscientiously came into it like we don't want that to be the bedrock and the foundation of what brings us together. It truly was Christ. It truly was. And I think that's what made it different. But I do think that there's some benefits to it, and there are incredible challenges to it. Because you have two very emotionally intelligent individuals who feel deeply, who are going through their own journeys,
especially as artists.
So in a lot of ways, sometimes I just wish I was a nurse so I could just be. Sometimes I wish it wasn't that difficult, but no, I think, could I have dated a non-artist? Or could I have married a non-artist? I don't know. I don't think so at the time. Did it make things easier? I don't think so. No, but yeah, it's complicated. It's like a whole thing.
So I want to say this really quickly to your point about the brothers who are listening who are like, but she got to be fine. No, not necessarily. You should be attracted to the woman or the sisters. You should be attracted to the man you're gonna marry. Attraction is real, physically, emotionally, etc.
Very real. Very
right.
real.
However, the Bible is very clear: beauty is fleeting. And so if you can't see yourself with him or her, right,
Fleeting.
in
Maybe not with
10,
her, because she got
20,
that. She
30
got that black
years.
woman sauce. She got the black woman sauce, but she still looks like young and all. I look crazy. From the moment we started dating, from the time now, bro, my kneecaps are ashy, my feet are flat, my stomach is significantly bigger. I'm not the popping guy right now. That joint goes away.
Right.
It goes away. Look, you see this? You see that arm jiggle right there? That's not. I didn't have that when we were dating.
For real, I was so fit when we got married.
Yo. That joint.
It's so true. And remember that app that came out that was all the rave, the age app. You remember that one, the face app? Yeah. I always and now when I coach and talk to the guys about marriage and things of that nature, I say, yo, put yourself and put your lady, your fiance, or who you want to marry through that filter, and ask yourself, do you still want to be with her? Do you still love her? Because that is going to be your reality in the future. It may not be for 20, 30, 40 years, but eventually, right, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen in increments. Every 5 to 10 years is going to be a considerable difference in how you look over time. Right.
And my big thing is this too. The reason why the primary thing are those fruits of the Spirit, which should be evidence of our walk with Christ, is that if those things ain't aligned, someone will look real ugly real quick.
It's true. And then what happens when they don't? What happens when you don't think that they're attractive anymore? If that's the bedrock of your marriage, right?
And let's just say they stay bad forever. Let's just say they are attractive forever. But if the fruit of the Spirit ain't there, you get real ugly real quick. I know some people who look beautifully delicious and are some of the most unkind, unsubmitted people ever, and that'll make you look ugly real quick. To me,
amen. No, that's so good. Yeah, the way you treat others, your posture, your approach, your kindness, for sure. Those are, like many times people say personality, but what they're really talking about in large part is the fruits of the Spirit. They don't have the language to articulate that, especially if they're cultural Christians, you know what I mean, versus devoted believers. But as devoted believers, I think you're right, man. The fruit of the Spirit will make someone beautiful, or not. So good. And so lastly, fatherhood. What has that been like? Because I love what you said, right? Marriage has been sanctifying, and yes and amen to that, because it will sanctify the heck out of you, right? But you said fatherhood is healing, and that really blessed me because I lost my father when I was only 8 years old. So being able to be a father, right, has been it's been incredibly joyous to me because I have been able to do all those things with my kids that I haven't been able to do with my father, right? With my parents. I lost my mother when I was young too. Hold
on. I want you to hold that thought real quick. Hold that thought real quick.
I think he's gonna get little man. Hey, I know a lot of you again are watching this after it's aired and we're no longer live, but definitely like, share, subscribe. If you got any value from this video, I hope that it gave you some insight. I hope that you are able to glean from this conversation some things that will help you in your life. And really, ultimately, that's the goal of this podcast. That's the goal of True Voices and True Voices Media in general. And so share it, DM it to someone, an artist, a poet, a creative, perhaps someone who needs to hear the portion we just discussed on marriage. Perhaps it's, a new father or mother that needs to hear it. But definitely share it, get it out there, and help us continue to share value through conversations like this with others. I thought you was coming in with little man.
I was, but he acting crazy because he's sick. It's been wild. I'm sorry, but
no, it's all good.
No, I'm so glad that you shared some of those things. I remember when we did the True Voices event. I remember you talking about your father at the end when you did the altar call.
Oh yes,
wow. That was one of the most powerful experiences that I've ever had.
Wow.
That altar call, I'll never forget it.
Man, praise God.
First time I really had to learn how to pray for people.
That's right, because we would line the altar with all the artists at the end.
Um, but fatherhood came in, you know, to speak to your point, fatherhood came into my life at an incredibly pivotal time.
Mhm.
Um, I had been going through, you know, I've been very open about this on Instagram. I even talked a little bit about here about my season of burnout and mental health. But I was in probably one of the toughest seasons wrestling with depression. I had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Um, and you know what makes it even more difficult, and I speak about this often, is that I'm a functioning depressed person. The way you have functioning addicts, I'm
Yes.
still productive in the material world. Um, it may
It
not
doesn't shut you
seem as
down
if,
completely.
you know, it may not seem as if, you know, it does anything. It doesn't shut me down completely, but I'm still going through it.
Right.
And at that point, I was, because of the pandemic, uh, because of losing my job, my industry completely being decimated, my financial stability completely being wiped away, moving across the country. You know, I was real deep in. I was real deep in. You know, and I was in therapy, meeting with psychiatrists, meeting with pastors. You know, I was battling suicidal ideation constantly. But for anyone who has dealt with depression on that sort of chemical level, you know, you're at a deficit of what they would call dopamine, serotonin. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's this other chemical called norepinephrine, I believe. Um, and you know, you're such at a deficit of those things. It's so difficult to kind of like crawl out and exist. And when my son was born, I almost passed out because I literally had a chemical rush of those things that I had been in a deficit. And I'm not saying he saved me, but I am saying that God used him to be very medicinal to me in that way.
I love that
Um,
listener.
yeah, yeah. And he gave me another reason to live. Uh, it, to see myself in this young child that God sort of allowed me to steward, you know, was very powerful, and it's very hard, especially because we're out here with no support. You know, we don't got like a grandma we can send them to. You know, we don't have any support. We don't have anyone. It's just me and my wife. And a lot of people would think like, "Oh, it's you and your wife, you'll be all right." But no, like we don't have a village to really like
Right.
help us. And so it's very difficult. And he don't sleep, and he be crazy and all of that. But he's the first thing in my life that I'm not mad that it's difficult. Everything else, I'm mad that it's hard. Marriage, I'm mad that it's difficult. Work, pissed off, super pissed off that it's hard. He's the first thing that I'm like, it's difficult, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So he's been very healing, quite literally to my mental health in that vein. Um, and I'm realizing that I'm not having a kid for like photo ops and like fun Christmas pictures. I'm realizing that he is a part of the work that the Lord is calling me to do in this world. And it's not only to just father him, but it's the things that I'm learning through this fathering, the things that I'm unlearning in the fathering that has been happening to me. I'll never forget. I actually spoke to Preston Perry, before my son was born, and I asked him for some advice, and he said, I just always said never. I think he said never father from your place of lack, of like what you missed out on your fathering, the fathering that happened to you. He said, but literally just try to father like Jesus. And it changed everything for me, because you could try to father the way you weren't fathered, but something will still be missing.
Yeah.
Something will still be missing.
Mm.
So I truly try to father in a way that is kind of pastoral. And though he's only like 18 months, you know, this month coming up, I don't know, man. He's just been so healing for me. He's just been
Yeah,
so
that's good.
healing for me.
I
Yeah.
mean, for me, as I hear you say that, for me it was a both and, because I I I, I wanted the father, like, because being an orphan, the Bible says that he is an orphan to the fatherless, right?
Yep.
Right. So I always identify with God as a father figure,
Mm-hmm.
and I always wanted to emulate like what I got from my relationship with Christ
Mm-hmm.
in my relationship with my son and with
Mm-hmm.
my daughter. Um, and you know, for me, there is a bigger story there. Um, but ultimately, I know that Jesus made me a father that I couldn't have been without him, right?
Mhm.
And the fact that I didn't have my father in my life did put a battery in my back, right? As a New
Mhm.
Yorker, right? As we would say, there was a sense of like, yo, like I want to do everything with them that I didn't get to do with my dad.
Mhm.
And to me, that was that really, it really motivated my fathering experience because it was cathartic and also like living vicariously, right? Through them, being able to do the things that I always wanted to do with him, but his time being cut short, right? Really, it really impeded that.
Mhm.
But even the memories that I have of him from being a young kid, is still something that also motivated me because whether it was him taking us to Coney Island one summer, or him
Mhm.
being a martial artist, like there were things about him that still resonated. And
And I
um,
feel like haven't you been like training in like Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I have,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, and I got into Muay Thai too, but
Mhm.
yeah, the martial arts was always something that was appealing to me in part because of him. He
Mhm.
was that that superhero in my mind, and
Mhm.
it didn't hurt that he was like a high level martial artist. He was a third degree black belt. The guy
Wow.
knew what he was doing, right? And I always wanted to learn from him, but again, it got cut short.
Mhm.
But now I train with my with my kids all the time. If my daughter can put me in an arm bar, she's 6. It's amazing. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this, and perhaps you can identify with one of our two stories, or you're just a father and you're struggling. No, one, it's supposed to be hard. I think you're right.
Mhm.
It's a it's an expectation that this is going to be difficult. But fatherhood, motherhood is incredibly rewarding. But what I love about it the most is that it constantly puts me in God's shoes to a very small extent.
Yeah.
Like you get the sense now of what it's like for him to say stiff-necked children, right? All throughout the Bible
Mhm.
to us. And now you're dealing with your own stiff-necked child, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is how the Lord feels. Like this is probably the closest I can get to what it's like for God looking down at his creation.
Something that I'm really want to get to a place is I've actually struggled around the area of God being a father.
Really?
Yeah, I've struggled a lot with it because of my own sort of because of my own journey with my own father.
Yeah.
And
But you
so
had your father growing up?
I did. I
Yeah.
did.
So it was different for me, like I said.
Yeah. No, I know.
So I
Yeah.
embraced that God the Father figure
Yes.
very
Yeah.
early on. But I would love to hear more about that, especially him being an Haitian father, right?
Yeah. My father is a very complicated man.
I
He's
say that as a
someone.
immigrant.
Yeah. My father's a very complicated man and incredibly hardworking and powerful. I, I would even say loving in whatever his own way is, but also filled with a lot of pain.
Mm,
My father was very. We did not have a really great relationship growing up. We're starting to reconcile and rebuild a lot of that stuff now, but there's so much about like God, being rich in mercy, God the Father being rich in mercy, God being compassionate and loving, God, weeping and mourning with those who mourn. That ain't my father. That ain't my dad. That
right.
ain't
You
my
can't
dad.
identify with a
Right? I
father
can't
who
identify.
is like that.
I
Yeah.
can identify with God, the creator, the authority, the
Yeah.
right. I can identify with
The
that. And I'm
Old
like,
Testament smite thief.
yeah. So what's been interesting is like the way I love my son is crazy. I would literally looked at him one day and I was like, there's literally nothing you can do that can. I was like, bro, if you are a murderer, like, where are we hiding the body, bro? Like, that's how much I was like, I would actually hide a body. But you know what I'm saying? Like, when I look at him, I'm like, there's something that rings in me. And then
Yes.
I tried to, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, if I feel that, how much more? How
Yes.
much more can God? But I've been struggling with that. That's a part of the area where I'm growing and just believing in God's overwhelming, unconditional love that chases us, like the love that leaves the 99 to get the one, the love that sacrificed himself on the cross, the love that says neither depth nor height nor angels nor demons nor whatever, nothing can separate us from that love. That's the love that I'm constantly having to remind myself.
I feel like it's probably the closest we ever will feel to Adam saying, "This is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh," right? Because he's the only husband that can say that about his wife in that regard, that she literally came from him, right? The rest of us become one with our spouse, but they didn't come from us and we didn't come from them. But our children, they literally are, right? Bone of my bone, flesh of our flesh. And I think that's why there's just this innate connectivity to them. Right? Like, to your point, also reassures us the love of our Father. Like, if I can love my child to this point, like, and no wonder it's based on grace. You know what I'm saying? Because there's nothing I could do to separate like his love from me. Like, if it's that powerful, you know what I mean?
So it's a lot. I'm still learning a lot. You know, he is a toddler and an infant, so he shall grow, and I'll go through so many more experiences. You know, he's starting to tell me no now. So, you know, I'm like, I had to bring the Haitian backhand down one time. All right, bro. You just saying words. You just saying words. But he's been so healing. He's been so and yeah, I'm learning. I'm still learning. I'm a work in progress, continuing to be sanctified and continue. I feel like I'm maturing right now. I feel like I'm being really matured at this moment.
As you're raising him.
Yeah.
I saw a meme or a post to that effect, that we forget that our parents, as they're raising us, are also growing themselves.
And the fact that I can be honest is that, I hope, informs my parenting. Like, he's 17, 18 months and I'll be saying sorry. Like, yo, bro, I ain't mean to do that, bro.
But that's huge, right? Because now he can identify with a father who's compassionate, who's forgiving, who's humble enough to say, I'm sorry. Right. And I'm sure that as much as our immigrant fathers can be challenging, being a father now also helps you have mercy and grace towards your dad.
Yes. In ways I did not even imagine.
Right.
Because I need to grow in forgiveness. That's an area where I'm like, I need to grow in forgiveness, because that's the Harlem in me.
Right.
I remember my bullies in the 4th grade, yo. I can't see them now because I want to give them hands. You know what I'm saying? Like, but vengeance is mine, says the Lord. You know what I mean? Like, I know that forgiveness is an area that I'm growing in as we speak in front of your face. And I also realized therapy started working when I became less triggered.
Ooh, okay.
I was like, oh, maybe therapy is working, because my father just said something, I ain't get mad. I'm like, maybe the Holy Spirit is working in my life right now. Maybe there's some evidence or something right there.
So let's end on that note. Mental health, guys. Again, if his link is in the description to his YouTube, his handle is @Carvins Lassant across all social media, I believe. You gotta go follow the lead, follow the feed, because it is so transparent. It's gonna really, I think, speak volumes to what it's like to be an artist and be transparent. Again, I had therapists on the show. I'm going to have another one on soon, actually, because mental health is something that is stigmatized within communities of color. Right, and as men of color, we're both very well aware of this. In particular, the Latino community will be quick to call you loco if you are in therapy. I'm so grateful that has changed in many generations now. In my generation, in the current generation, compared to the previous ones. But even within Christendom, right, mental health and therapy can be really stigmatized, poo-pooed, looked down at. Question your savedness, your salvation. Yes. So talk to us about that. The blessing of mental health, becoming self-aware enough to go, you know what? I need therapy. A counselor would be good for me. In fact, the scriptures are clear right? There is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. And so,
Yeah. I think,
pastors, right, disciple makers, big brothers in the faith, and of course therapists can all be part of that multitude of counselors,
yeah,
father figures, your actual biological father. These are all good sources of counsel, but there's nothing else like a trained mental health professional,
yes.
especially if they love Jesus.
Woo.
Highly recommended Christian therapist. If
Yeah,
you
yeah.
listen.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as this. You know, you mentioned your injury, your leg injury.
Yeah.
I'll spew out some injuries that I have: 2 herniated bulging discs in my lumbar vertebrae, in between my 3rd and 4th vertebrae and my 4th and 5th vertebrae. One that's going 4 millimeters to the right, hitting on my nerve. Another that's going 4 millimeters to the left, hitting on my nerve. I've had antherolateral impingements in my ankle. I've broken my right ankle, tore ligaments. I have chronic patellar tendonitis on both my knees, an inflamed left quad tendon that connects to my patella on my left leg. I'm starting to have some mid back issues, just picking up my son a whole bunch. Got a crick in my neck. I can go on the list. How foolish would I be if I didn't address any of those things? I would be foolish, and I would be a danger to myself. And because the mind sort of exists inside, right? When we look at heartbreak, when we look at distress, when we look at seasons of difficulty, of financial strain, when we look at environment, right? Growing up in the hood, living in places like New York, where the speed is one that isn't actually normal. All of those things are injuries. And what I realized that I had been existing with injuries my whole life untreated. And so we can stigmatize it, we can call people weak, we can call people crazy, but at the end of the day, we all have them. And they will unearth and manifest at some point. And just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it ain't on its way. Because one thing that mental health don't do is discriminate. White, black, it don't matter who you is. It'll get you. And I always say, another thing that I have a lot of experience in is dental work, right? I got beautiful teeth, right? But what people don't know is that I have a weak enamel. It's just hereditary. My mom got weak enamel, it's hereditary. Man, you give me a Snickers bar right now, I'll get 3 cavities instant. Right?
Sheesh.
For anyone who's ever had a root canal happens when a cavity goes untreated for too long. Yes. Therefore, the nerve must be removed for the tooth in order for it to stay. If you go a step further, a tooth can get so brittle and damaged that it doesn't matter if you remove the nerve, the whole thing must be displaced. What I believe with mental health is if you wait too long, it could be more of a danger than a benefit.
That's a powerful analogy.
So I have a lot of feelings about it. I feel like a whole mental health advocate at this point in my life. It's so funny. I watch some of these crazy YouTubers talk down to men with depression. It's real sad. But I think if I'm to be healthy, and if I'm to be whole, and if I'm to reach the full totality of who Christ wants me to be, I have to be mentally healthy. I have to. And I think the word supports that in so many ways and facets. And it is a high priority, a non-negotiable high priority now in my life, that if it will not feed my mental health, it must be removed. Period.
Amen.
Nothing will stop me of reaching the totality of who God wants me to be. I want to live as a joyous man. I want to live who rejoices both in trial and in blessing. I want to be a man who is emotionally present for his wife, for his son, and I want to love people well. And I can only do that if I'm good. So
dope to end on that note, man. That was
in there.
Spot on, man.
I gotta go run to this theater and warm up to do the show.
Where can people find you? What's the website? Any latest projects?
Carvins Lassant on everything. The website, www.carvinslassant.com, Instagram at Carvins Lassant, Facebook. I don't even use Facebook. I'm actually about to take Facebook. I'm about to delete it just completely. as a part of my mental health, because I don't need to be on there. What I need to be on there for? I don't talk to anybody on there. I just be scrolling to be nosy, to look at people's lives.
Yeah, I literally have been off for like, I want to say like over 6 years. I had to reactivate it to get access to our True Voices page again. And I'm just like, okay, how do I put this down again? How do I private this again?
But that's it. At Carvin Society, at everything. Love y'all. Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad we finally got to. Y'all, whoever's listening, we've been trying to do this for years. We've been trying to chop it up for years, and just talk for years, and it's been crazy.
I'm so glad we got to do it too, man.
Hopefully, insight around what I was going through in life around mental health.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your transparency, for your insight, for your time, for your candor, man. I'm telling you, it's going to bless many of artists, creatives, and everyday people who come across it. In fact, if you're one of the people that are listening right now, simply pass it forward. Hit share, DM it, text it. The beautiful thing about these videos now, everything is so shareable, Get it out there, really help people get some value from it. I really hope that you got some value from it. As we wrap, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Once again, for our True Voices podcast, aka It's Complicated. Oh, I forgot to tell you that. We that's the AKA of the podcast. It's blank. It's complicated. Because everything we discuss, man, really does hinge on that reality. Manhood, marriage, ministry, all complicated topics, and everything in between. From poetry to latest events to social media influencers giving marriage advice. It's all very complicated. So we thank you for joining us. Man, Carvin, this was good, man. Thank you so much.
Love you, brother. Appreciate you.
Love you, man. Praying for you and the fam. Continue to do your thing and continue to stay in touch. Before you get off Facebook, make sure you share this on yours.
That'll be my last quote. All
right, family. It was a blast.
Take care.
Easy.